Since 1776, there have always been the military. And even prior to that, our purpose is to give ourselves freedom. We fight for our freedom. If it weren't for your veterans, we might be speaking German now, or we could be speaking British. We're a country of individuals. We are a melting pot. Doesn't make any difference whether we're a Christian, whether we're Muslim, whether we're Jewish. Doesn't make any difference whether I'm black or I'm white or I'm brown or I'm yellow. We're Americans. We've got away from that.
We had a mailbox, but I never did look at the mail very often. But the first thing she did, just prowling around, she went and looked at the mailbox, and there that notice was for my enlistment.
I was drafted, as the story goes, I was jerked off the porch. I had splinters in my hands when I went to the Army.
I'll take that as an unwilling to go.
U.S. service, unwilling service. That's what the U.S. serial number was.
Well, I was 18 in August. I registered, and 15th of December I was in the Navy.
Oh, I didn't think a whole lot. I just doing what I was told to do, and didn't really bother me either way. Well, my older brother Garl had just, got back not too many years before that. He was over in the South Pacific about 2.5 years. So I knew if he could take it, well, I could too, so I just went on.
During that particular period, the draft was still drawn and was still televised on TV. My dad and I, and this was just shortly after I graduated from high school, my birthday was coming up, and we were watching the drawing of the draft. Now, the drawing of the draft, for those who don't understand it, is they throw 365 dates into a bucket. They draw these dates out, and if your birth date is drawn, then 9 times out of 10 you were drafted into the Army. This was 1971. I was watching it. My birth date came up number 78, which means I was under 100, which was pretty sure I was going to be drafted into the Army. And of course, at this time, Vietnam was still going pretty heavy. And I told my dad, I said, I'm not going to run away from it. I said, I'm going to enlist into the Air Force, and there's a better chance that I won't be going to Vietnam. Well, as time had it, I did end up in Vietnam. But that was the reason why I enlisted into the military.
The kitchen truck driver was rotating. He was going back home, and so I was given his job. Drove truck, and in that position I hauled everything from people, boys, up to the front line and back, and artillery, and well, of course, kitchen products mainly, and also water. Had a water tank that we went to where the water pump was, and that was my job to do that.
At that time, I was working in the medical wards, and it was sickness. What we run into different, these poor boys was in there sick, and when we get in the hospital now, 2 or 3 days, we're wanting to go home. We're wanting to get out of there. That was altogether different. Our job was to watch these boys that they don't do something to make themselves sicker, to get to stay a few days longer. Because them poor boys knew when they left there that they might not be lucky enough to get in the hospital again.
They'd have alerts you know, and that the Russians are coming. This was starting of the Cold War. And my job at that time, everybody was assigned a particular thing to do when we'd have an alert. Well, my job was to find a tank that would run and take it down to the railhead and load it on a flat car.
I was still an age repairman. We worked on fighter aircraft, mostly F-4s. That was the aircraft of the time. And pretty much the same thing that I had been doing my entire active duty career. Of course, while stationed at Spokane, I was deployed twice in support of the war in Vietnam.
Another occasion I took some ammunition and some boys from our unit up to dig in emplacements for their quad 50s on the half track and twin 40s on small tanks. Took them up kind of on a little bit of elevated strip there to dig in emplacement, you know, and had my truck up on this little bit elevated spot, and after about 30 minutes, why, she all came over. And then a little bit later, one hit was right out there. I said, that's time for me to move. He's getting me zeroed in, so.
USS Indianapolis was a cruiser. It was sunk right before the end of the war. And it was always thought, or we always thought at least, that it was carrying an atomic bomb because it was traveling by herself, and unbeknownst to anybody else, I guess somebody knew, but we didn't. They were traveling by themselves, and that was a no-no. They wasn't supposed to do that. And at that time, we thought it was carrying an atomic bomb. But it took a torpedo or two, I don't remember now, midships, and 11 minutes, I think it was 11 minutes, don't quote me on this for sure, but 11 minutes later, it was underwater. And we picked up some survivors off of that. There wasn't many. Out of 11 or 1,200 men, I think we rescued about 125, something like that. And this was 3 or 4 days later, and they were in bad shape, bad shape.
I was in country 3 days, and then my first major firefight.
In 3 days?
Mm-hmm. My first 3 days I was there, everything was fine, and the third day, all hell broke loose.
I stepped off the plane, and a first sergeant, all he was screaming was find a hole, because we were under a rocket attack at the time as soon as the plane landed. I found a hole. I didn't come out of it for about 6 hours. It was shaky. It was scary. It was a bad experience. I dealt with it for years. Finally learned how to just flat deal with it, period. I mean, what can I do? There's nothing I can do about it. It's either deal with it or go crazy.
I got hit with our own artillery, though.
Explain that.
When you call in a mission, they fire, it's an 8-inch round, and they fire it into the field, and it's supposed to go to the grid that it's called for. One didn't, it cut short. And I was in a hole, and the shrapnel got me through the foot. And the only thing we can figure is God's way of saying, time to leave.
The first welcome home I can remember was when I came home from Desert Storm and we flew into Bangor, Maine. There was a group of people at Bangor, Maine airport. That's where every aircraft at that time that came back from Desert Storm or anywhere over in Southwest Asia flew into Bangor, Maine, was our first stop in the United States. And when you get off that plane, there is a group of people, and I think they still do because I see it on television several times since then, that welcomes every troop home that flies through there.
We weren't welcome.
Just by family and friends?
Oh no, family and friends was fine. It's the rest of the people in the United States. It was an unpopular war and we weren't very well liked.
And that's obviously still with you. Those feelings are today.
Yep.
I think our people in Washington need to be aware and need to remember what it's like for the boys to be overseas amongst all the killing and bombing and shelling and everything, and be aware that if we don't do it there, it'll be over here.
I tell you, the freedom and life in America, this is the best place in the world.
We're losing our freedom in this country and they need to start taking notice of what's going on. They need to talk to some veterans and find out what they did so they have this freedom right. It's not cheap and we're losing it. We need to get God back in our country.
On certain occasions, you'll see the American flag, I'll tear up.
And why is that?
I don't know. I don't know. It's just, I've seen several flags, but it's home, is what it is. And it's to be defended.
Yes.
It's not a toy. It's not a play pretty. There's a meaning to it. That means everything to us.
It represents our freedom, and yeah, people need to remember it and hang on to it.
That's honor. That's glory.
Everything. It means my freedom. It means my hope. It means me as an American, as an individual. It means I'll die for that flag. No ifs, ands, or buts.